At my housewarming party, my daughter-in-law smiled, set a glass of whiskey in front of me, and said, "This one's for you, Dad. A new beginning." I was about to take a sip when my granddaughter tugged my sleeve. I set the glass down for just a moment, and my son, standing behind me, picked it up without thinking. 30 minutes later, what I saw in front of me left me speechless. Before we continue, thank you for being here with me. If this opening touched something in you, I'd truly love to know where you're watching from. Your presence here genuinely matters. And if stories like this resonate with you, please consider subscribing so you don't miss what comes next. Just a quick note, some elements ahead have been fictionalized to protect privacy and highlight the message. Any resemblance to real events or individuals is purely coincidental, but the message you're about to hear is deeply meaningful. My name is Chris Sullivan, and I'm 68 years old. That number used to bother me, felt like a countdown to irrelevance, to being shuffled aside in a world that worships youth and speed. But standing in the living room of my new house on this bright June morning in Portland, Oregon, I felt something I hadn't felt in the 2 years since my wife Eleanor passed. Possibility. The craftsman-style house wasn't just a purchase, it was a declaration. After 3 decades of designing buildings for other people, reviewing blueprints until my eyes blurred, managing construction sites in rain that soaked through every layer of clothing the Pacific Northwest could throw at you, I'd finally built something for myself. Well, not built exactly. I'd bought it from a couple relocating to Arizona for retirement, but I'd chosen every detail that mattered. The oak floors that caught the morning light just right. The built-in bookshelves in the living room deep enough for my architecture books and Eleanor's novels. The kitchen with windows facing east, so I could drink my coffee and watch the sunrise over the neighbors' maple trees. I walked through each room slowly that morning, running my hand along the door frames, checking the corners where walls met ceilings, old habits from a lifetime of catching contractor shortcuts. Everything was solid. Everything was mine. At 68, I was starting over, and it felt right in a way I hadn't expected. The house had 3 bedrooms. One for me. One that I'd set up as an office, though I wasn't sure what I'd do with it now that I was retired. And one for Grace, my granddaughter, for when she stayed over on weekends. She was 8 years old, all energy and questions, with Eleanor's eyes and her mother's determination. I'd already put a small desk in there for her drawings, and stuffed animals she'd left on her last visit sat arranged on the bed like a jury waiting to pass judgment on my decorating skills. My son Matthew and his wife Ophelia lived 20 minutes away, close enough for Sunday dinners, but far enough that I wasn't hovering, something Eleanor had always warned me about. "Let them live their lives, Chris," she'd say. "You raised a good man. Trust that." I did trust Matthew. He was a high school English teacher, patient and thoughtful, the kind of son who called just to check in, who remembered the anniversary of his mother's death without needing a reminder. At 38, he'd built a good life. Married Ophelia 9 years ago in a ceremony by the Columbia River. They'd welcomed me into their lives with warmth that never felt forced, at least not in the beginning. But Ophelia, there was something about my daughter-in-law that I couldn't quite name, couldn't quite shake. She was charming, certainly a real estate agent, who knew how to smile at exactly the right moment, how to make you feel like you were the most important person in the room. When I'd told them I was buying this house, she'd been enthusiastic, asking all the right questions about square footage and property value and neighborhood amenities. She'd always been the ambitious type, luxury cars, designer handbags, the kind of lifestyle her real estate commissions should have supported. But over the years, I'd noticed Matthew quietly shouldering more of the household expenses, while Ophelia chased bigger deals that never quite seemed to close. Not my business, I'd told myself. Every marriage has its own economics. Then about 3 months ago, she'd suggested over dinner that I should consider putting the house in a family trust. "Just for estate planning, Dad," she'd said. She'd been calling me that for 9 years now, ever since the wedding. But lately it sounded less like affection and more like claim. It would make things so much easier for Matthew when the time comes. You know how complicated probate can be. I'd smiled and changed the subject. I was 68, not 88. And something about the way she'd said, "when the time comes," had felt less like concern and more like anticipation. I dismissed the thought immediately. What kind of person suspects their daughter-in-law of ulterior motives? Eleanor would have told me I was being paranoid. But Eleanor wasn't here anymore. And my architect's instinct, the one that could spot a load-bearing wall pretending to be decorative, that could see structural problems hiding behind fresh paint, that instinct whispered that Ophelia's helpfulness had foundations I couldn't quite see. I pushed the thought away as I walked out onto the back porch. Tonight was my housewarming party, my chance to show off this place to the people who mattered. Matthew and Grace, certainly. My old colleague James Fletcher, who'd helped me navigate retirement without losing my mind. A few neighbors I'd met during the move. Even Ophelia, though I found myself oddly reluctant to have her in my space, touching my things, evaluating everything with that professional eye she brought to every property. The backyard was modest, but perfect. A stone patio where I'd set up a grill for tonight. The oak tree that had sold me on the property, its branches spreading like a benediction over the lawn. Garden beds along the fence that I'd planned to fill with vegetables next spring, assuming my knees held up for the bending. Inside, I'd already set out glasses and plates, arranged furniture to encourage conversation, picked up the good whiskey that Matthew liked. Everything was ready. Everything was perfect. So why did I feel this low-grade anxiety humming under my excitement? Why did my mind keep circling back to Ophelia's smile when she talked about the family trust? Why did I find myself mentally reviewing the locks on my doors, the passwords on my accounts, the clarity of my will? You're being ridiculous," I said aloud to the empty house. My voice sounded strange in the unfamiliar space, like it belonged to someone older than I felt. "It's just a party." I checked my watch. 6 hours until guests arrived. 6 hours to shake off this unease and remember that I was celebrating something good. I'd worked 3 jobs after Eleanor died young to put Matthew through college. I'd saved every dollar I could spare for 30 years. This house wasn't just wood and nails. It was proof that sacrifice paid off, that patience earned rewards, that a man could build something lasting even after loss. Tonight was about joy, about new beginnings, about showing my son and granddaughter that I was thriving, not just surviving. I stood at the living room window, looking out at the quiet street, at the maple trees, casting morning shadows across pristine lawns, at neighbors walking dogs and children riding bicycles in that carefree way that only happened in safe neighborhoods where people knew each other's names. This was my home, my sanctuary. My reward for decades of early mornings and late nights of blueprints and building codes, of saying no to luxuries so Matthew could say yes to opportunities. No one could take this from me. The doorbell rang at exactly 6:15 that evening. I've always appreciated punctuality, a habit from decades of construction deadlines, where 15 minutes could mean the difference between a project staying on schedule or spiraling into costly delays. Through the front window, I could see James Fletcher standing on the porch, a bottle of wine in one hand, and that easy grin he wore like a comfortable old jacket. "Chris," he said when I opened the door, pulling me into one of those back-slapping hugs that men our age had perfected over the years. "This place looks even better than you described. You always did know how to pick the bones." James was 65, a contractor who'd worked on half the buildings I'd designed in Portland. We'd spent 30 years arguing about load-bearing walls and arguing about building codes. And somewhere along the way, we'd become the kind of friends who didn't need to talk every week to know the other one was there. Come in," I said, taking the wine. "You're early." Wanted to see it before the crowd arrived. He stepped inside his contractor's eye, immediately cataloging the crown, molding the hardwood floors, the way the evening light came through the west-facing windows. "Oak floors. Smart choice. They'll outlast both of us. That's the plan. More guests arrived in the following minutes. Frank Morrison, an architect I'd worked with on a hospital project in the 90s, showed up with his wife. Helen Tucker from 3 houses down brought a casserole that smelled like comfort food and good intentions. An elderly couple whose names I promptly forgot, but whose smiles were genuine enough that it didn't seem to matter. The house filled with the sounds I'd hoped for. Conversation and laughter, ice clinking in glasses. The low hum of people discovering they had mutual acquaintances or shared opinions about the Portland weather. I'd set up speakers on the back patio, and jazz drifted through the open doors, mixing with the smell of the grill I'd fired up earlier. I was refilling the ice bucket when the doorbell rang again. Through the window, I saw Matthew's car in the driveway, and my chest did that thing it had done since he was born, that quick lift of joy that came from knowing my son was near. Grace burst through the door first, a whirlwind of pink dress and blonde hair. "Grandpa, your house is so big." I crouched down my knees, protesting slightly, and caught her in a hug that smelled like strawberry shampoo and childhood. "Not too big for you, sweetheart. I've got a room with your name on it, and with the desk for my drawings, the very same." Matthew came in behind her, and I stood to embrace my son. He'd inherited Eleanor's height and my build, and at 38, he still had that teacher's posture, shoulders slightly hunched from years of leaning over students' desks. "Dad, this place is perfect, really. Your mother would have loved it," I said quietly. "Yeah, she would have." His eyes held that familiar shadow that appeared whenever we mentioned Eleanor, but then he smiled. "Come on, I want you to meet someone." Ophelia stepped through the doorway then, and with her came a woman I didn't recognize. Ophelia wore a dress that looked expensive, the kind that probably cost more than Matthew made in a week, and her smile was camera-ready. Dad, you remember Claire, don't you?" Ophelia said brightly. "She helped plan our wedding. I ran into her last week and insisted she come tonight." The woman extended her hand. "Claire Davidson? It's lovely to meet you, Mr. Sullivan. Ophelia's told me so much about you. She was somewhere in her early 40s, I guessed, with dark hair pulled back in a way that suggested professional efficiency. Her handshake was firm, her eye contact direct. Something about her seemed carefully calibrated, not unfriendly, but measured in a way that made me think of lawyers or accountants. "Please call me Chris," I said. "Any friend of Ophelia's is welcome here." But as the evening progressed and I circulated among my guests, I found myself noticing Claire. She had a way of asking questions that seemed casual, but weren't. She'd complimented the house, then asked about the square footage, admired the neighborhood, then inquired about property values, mentioned retirement planning in a way that felt like fishing for information about my finances. Wedding planners didn't usually care about investment portfolios. I was considering this, trying to decide if I was being paranoid or perceptive, when Ophelia's voice cut through my thoughts. "Dad, let me make you a drink. What's your favorite still old-fashioned, right?" She'd already moved to the makeshift bar I'd set up on the kitchen counter, bottles of whiskey and bourbon, a bucket of ice-mixing glasses I'd bought specifically for tonight. She worked with the confidence of someone who'd tended bar before measuring and pouring with practiced ease. But I watched her hands, watched the way she prepared one glass with extra care, the way her eyes flicked to me, and then away the way she positioned that particular glass on a small napkin marked, I realized, by its placement slightly apart from the others. Grace appeared at my elbow, tugging on my sleeve. "Grandpa, look what I drew at school." She thrust a piece of construction paper at me covered in crayon drawings of what might have been a house or possibly a spaceship. With Grace's art, you never could tell. "That's beautiful, sweetheart. Is that my new house? It's a castle for you to be safe in." Something about the word safe made my skin prickle, but I smiled and kissed the top of her head. The safest castle in all of Portland. The party swirled around us. James was telling a story about a building inspector we'd both despised. Frank Morrison was debating the merits of sustainable architecture with Helen Tucker, who apparently had opinions about solar panels. Somewhere in the background, Miles Davis played through the speakers, his trumpet weaving through conversations about property taxes and the best route to avoid traffic on Interstate 5. It should have been perfect. It was perfect. Except for Claire, who was now talking to Matthew, but watching me with an intensity that felt like assessment. Except for Ophelia, who'd finished mixing drinks and was walking toward me with one glass held carefully in both hands, her smile bright enough to hurt. Ophelia approached the crystal glass, catching the lamplight amber liquid swirling as she moved. Her smile was perfect, the kind she'd practiced in mirrors, I was certain of it, the kind that real estate agents learn to deploy like a weapon. Professional warmth without actual heat. But her eyes were watching me the way I'd seen contractors watch buildings marked for demolition, calculating, measuring, waiting to see which wall would fall first. "Ma, your favorite, Dad," she said, extending the glass toward me. "Just the way you like it." She handed me the glass with both hands like an offering. "Your favorite, Dad," she said. "Enjoy." I took it, feeling the cool weight of the crystal in my palm. The amber liquid caught the light from the chandelier Eleanor and I had picked out together 30 years ago. "Thanks, Ophelia. You didn't have to go to all this trouble. No trouble at all." Her smile was perfect. Too perfect. Something in my gut twisted the same instinct that had saved a dozen projects over 3 decades. The instinct that noticed when a beam was a quarter-inch off, when a foundation plan didn't quite add up, when a contractor's numbers were too good to be true. I set the glass down on the side table. "I'll enjoy it in just a minute. Let me say hello to everyone first." For a fraction of a second, her expression flickered. Disappointment? Frustration? Then the smile snapped back into place. "Of course, Dad. Whenever you're ready." The doorbell rang again. I turned toward the foyer, grateful for the interruption. That must be David. He texted that he'd be running late. I didn't see Matthew step up behind me. Didn't see him reach for a glass on the side table. Didn't see which one he picked up. By the time I opened the door and welcomed David inside, an old colleague from my early days at Morrison and Partners, Matthew was already back in conversation with James Fletcher by the window. Whiskey in hand, laughing about something related to the school year coming to an end. The party found its rhythm. Conversation flowed. Grace showed me her latest drawing, a picture of Grandpa's castle, with carefully colored flowers around the front door. I hugged her tight, feeling the weight of her small arms around my neck, and for a moment everything felt right. But 15 minutes in, I noticed Matthew wiping his forehead. "You okay, son?" I asked, stepping closer. "Yeah, just warm in here." He loosened his collar, face flushed. "Must be all the people." I frowned. It was 72 degrees inside. Perfectly comfortable. "You want some water?" "No, I'm fine." He waved me off, turning back to James, but I caught the way he steadied himself against the wall just for a second. 10 minutes later, Matthew found Ophelia in the kitchen. I overheard him through the open doorway. "I've got a headache," he said, "and I'm feeling a little dizzy. Did I drink that old-fashioned too fast?" Ophelia's voice was smooth, concerned. "Maybe you're coming down with something, honey. You've been working so hard with finals." "Yeah, maybe." He pressed his fingers to his temples. I set down my own drink, still untouched, and watched him through the doorway. His movements were slow, unsteady. Not drunk. Something else. 5 minutes after that, Matthew's nose started bleeding. Not a trickle, a stream. He grabbed a napkin, pressed it to his face, but the blood soaked through in seconds. He reached for another. Another. His eyes went wide. "Chris," James called out. "Something's wrong." The room went silent. Every head turned. I was at Matthew's side in 3 strides. "Sit down. Head forward, not back." I grabbed a handful of napkins from the table, pressed them firmly to the bridge of his nose. 30 years ago, I'd taken a first aid course after a site accident. I still remembered the basics, but the blood kept coming. Through the napkins, down his chin, onto his shirt. "Dad, I can't." Matthew's voice was thick, slurred. His knees buckled. I caught him, lowered him to the floor as carefully as I could. "Someone call 911. Ophelia was suddenly there, kneeling beside us, tears streaming down her face. "Matthew? Matthew, can you hear me? Oh my God, what's happening?" Grace's voice, high and frightened, cut through the chaos. "Daddy, Grandpa? What's wrong with Daddy?" "He's going to be okay, sweetheart." I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. The blood wasn't stopping. Matthew's eyes were unfocused, rolling back. "Stay with me, son." I kept pressure on his nose, but now there was blood at the corners of his mouth, too, seeping from his gums. James was on the phone with 911, voice steady, giving our address. Frank Morrison had moved the other guests back, clearing space. Helen Tucker had taken Grace into the other room. The operator's voice came through James's phone on speaker. "Is the patient conscious?" "Well, barely." I said loud enough for her to hear. "He's bleeding from his nose and mouth. We can't get it to stop. What has he consumed in the last hour?" "Whiskey," I said. "Just whiskey. We're having a party. Any medications, any known allergies?" "No, nothing." Matthew's eyes fluttered. His hand gripping mine went slack. "Matthew." Ophelia's scream was raw, desperate, convincing. I looked up at her, and for just a moment our eyes met. Hers were wide, wet with tears. But something behind them didn't match. Something was off. The ambulance arrived 8 minutes later, Portland fire and rescue sirens, wailing lights flashing through the front windows. The paramedics moved fast, professional, taking over from me with practiced efficiency. "A possible anticoagulant overdose," one of them muttered to his partner as they checked Matthew's vitals. "Pupils reactive, BP dropping. Let's move." They loaded Matthew onto the gurney. I climbed into the ambulance beside him. "I'm coming too," Ophelia said, but the paramedic shook his head. "Only one family member. Meet us at Providence Portland Medical Center." She stepped back, nodding, tears still streaming. "I'll get Grace and follow right behind you." I held Matthew's hand as the doors slammed shut. The siren screamed to life. Through the small window in the back door, I caught one last glimpse of my house. The house I'd dreamed of for 30 years, and Ophelia standing in the doorway surrounded by stunned guests. Her face was a mask of grief. But I'd spent 3 decades reading blueprints, reading people, reading the spaces between what was said and what was meant. And in that moment, as the ambulance tore through the streets of Portland, with my son's life hanging in the balance, one thought consumed me. That drink wasn't meant for Matthew. It was meant for me. The fluorescent lights in the emergency room waiting area made my eyes ache. Or maybe it was the fear. Dr. Melissa Stone stepped through the swinging doors, her expression serious. She was maybe 40 with tired eyes, and the kind of calm that came from years of delivering bad news. She scanned the room, found me standing by the window, and walked over. "Mr. Sullivan," I straightened. "How is he?" "Your son is stable. We've got him on IV fluids, vitamin K, and we're monitoring his blood work closely." She gestured to the plastic chairs. "Can we sit?" We sat. I didn't want to, but my legs were shaking. "Mr. Sullivan, your son was exposed to a toxic dose of anticoagulant medication, warfarin. Combined with alcohol, it caused uncontrolled bleeding. We caught it in time, but it was close." The words hit me like a freight train. "Warfarin, yes. Do you know if Matthew takes any blood thinners?" "No, he doesn't. I'm the one who takes warfarin." I heard my voice crack. "For my heart condition. I've been on it for 6 years." Dr. Stone's brow furrowed. "Is it possible he accidentally took your medication, mixed up a pill bottle?" "No." I shook my head. "Matthew doesn't live with me. He has his own place across town. He wouldn't have access to my medicine cabinet. She made a note on her tablet. Then we need to figure out how this happened. Warfarin doesn't just appear in someone's system by accident. Before I could respond, the automatic doors slid open and Ophelia rushed in Grace's hand in hers. Her eyes were red, her hair disheveled, her voice breathless. "Doctor, is he okay? Is Matthew okay?" Dr. Stone stood. "He's stable. We're treating him for— Could it be something from the party?" Ophelia interrupted, looking between us. "Food poisoning, a bad batch of shrimp. Someone made a mistake with the catering." "Ma, this isn't food poisoning," Dr. Stone said gently but firmly. "This is pharmaceutical. Your husband ingested a significant amount of warfarin." Ophelia blinked. "Warfarin. But how could it be? Could someone have given him the wrong medication by mistake? Could it be contamination? Ophelia," I said quietly, "let the doctor finish." She stopped, mouth still, half-open, eyes darting between us. But something about the way she was asking her questions struck me as off. She wasn't asking, "Is he okay?" or "When can I see him?" She was asking, "What do they know?" Dr. Stone glanced at her watch. "We're moving Matthew to the ICU for observation. His vitals are improving, but we need to monitor him for the next 24 hours. You'll be able to see him briefly once he's settled." "Thank you," I said. My voice sounded far away. Dr. Stone left. Grace curled up in a chair, clutching a stuffed bear someone had grabbed from the house. Ophelia sat across from me, phone in hand, scrolling, tapping, not looking at me. The waiting room was nearly empty. A janitor mopped the far corner. A vending machine hummed. The clock on the wall read 2:47 a.m. I couldn't sleep. Couldn't stop replaying the night in my head. Ophelia handing me the glass. The way she watched me. The way her face fell when I set it down. Matthew behind me picking up a glass. But which one? The blood, the panic, the ambulance, and now here. Warfarin in his system. My warfarin. The thought formed slowly like ice spreading across glass. That drink was meant for me. I looked up. Ophelia had moved to the hallway, phone pressed to her ear. Through the glass partition, I could see her pacing, gesturing sharply, her face tight with anger. She wasn't speaking loudly enough for me to hear the words, but her body language said everything. This wasn't the face of a worried wife. This was the face of someone whose plan had gone wrong. I stood, walked closer, stayed just out of sight around the corner. Her voice drifted through the gap in the door. "I don't care what you think, it wasn't supposed to. No, listen to me." She stopped mid-sentence, turned, saw me through the glass. Our eyes met. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she ended the call, slipped the phone into her pocket, and walked back into the waiting room with a bright, shaky smile. "That was my sister," she said. "Just checking in, she's so worried." I nodded, said nothing. The sky outside the windows started to lighten. Dawn came slow in June, but it came. Dr. Stone returned just after 5 a.m. "Matthew's stable. The bleeding has stopped. You can see him now, just for a few minutes." I followed her through the maze of hallways to the ICU. Matthew lay in a narrow bed, pale as the sheets tubes running from his arms, monitors beeping softly. His chest rose and fell. Alive. I sat down beside him, took his hand. It was cold. "I don't know what happened last night, son," I whispered. "But I'm going to find out." He didn't answer. The machines beeped. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. When I returned to the waiting room, Ophelia was asleep on the chairs across the hall. Phone clutched in her hand, face peaceful. The picture of a worried wife. But I had seen that phone call. I had seen the look in her eyes before the tears came. And for the first time in 9 years, I wondered who my son had really married. I came home around noon the next day, and it looked like a crime scene that hadn't been investigated yet. Plastic cups littered the coffee table. Half-eaten plates of food sat abandoned on the kitchen counter. A strand of decorative lights hung crooked over the mantel, like someone had grabbed it in a hurry. The house still smelled faintly of whiskey and barbecue smoke, but I didn't see it the way I had 24 hours ago. Now everything looked different. I moved through the living room, slowly cataloging details the way I used to catalog blueprints, measuring noting filing away. The side table where I'd set my drink, the spot where Matthew had collapsed, the doorway where Ophelia had stood, tears, streaming hands pressed to her mouth. I walked into the kitchen. The whiskey bottle sat on the counter exactly where she'd left it. I picked it up carefully, turned it in the light. Expensive label. Woodford Reserve, still 2/3 full. I found a Ziploc bag in the drawer, slipped the bottle inside, and sealed it. Then I pulled a Sharpie from the junk drawer and wrote on the bag in block letters, June 8, 2024, housewarming party, whiskey, Ophelia, architect's habit. Label everything, document everything. I set the bag on the counter and headed to the bathroom. The medicine cabinet was exactly as I'd left it. Organized, alphabetical, each prescription bottle lined up in a row. I'd been doing it that way since Eleanor died. It kept me sane. I pulled out the Warfarin bottle. Orange cap. White label. My name printed in black ink. Christopher Sullivan, Warfarin 5 milligrams. Take 1 tablet daily. I unscrewed the cap and poured the pills onto the counter. Then I counted. 1, 2, 3, 10, 15, 20, 21, 22. 22 pills. I counted again, slower this time, lining them up in rows of 5. 22. The prescription had been refilled 2 weeks ago, May 26th. I took 1 pill every morning with breakfast. No exceptions. That meant I should have 28 pills left, but I only had 22. 6 pills were missing. I opened the drawer beneath the sink and pulled out my medication log, a small notebook, where I tracked every dose. Eleanor had taught me to do it after I'd accidentally double-dosed once years ago. 1 checkmark per day. Every single day accounted for. I flipped to May 26th. Every day since then had a checkmark. No missed doses, no double doses, no mistakes. Someone had taken those pills. I sat down on the edge of the bathtub, the bottle still in my hand, and forced myself to think clearly. Who had been in this house in the last 2 weeks? Matthew and Ophelia had come over for dinner once. Grace had used the guest bathroom, but I'd been with them the whole time. James Fletcher had stopped by to drop off some plans, but he'd stayed in the living room. And then the memory hit me like a punch to the chest. 3 days before the party, Ophelia had come by. She'd said she wanted to help set up decorations early, get a head start on things. I'd been in the garage organizing tools. She'd been inside alone for maybe 20 minutes. She'd had access to this bathroom, this cabinet, this bottle. I stood up, walked back to the kitchen, and opened my laptop. Searched Warfarin therapeutic dose versus toxic dose. The results loaded. I scanned the numbers, did the math. Therapeutic dose 5 milligrams per day. 6 pills, 30 milligrams total. Crushed into a drink combined with alcohol enough to cause dangerous bleeding in someone who wasn't on the medication regularly. Enough to cause serious harm, or worse. I closed the laptop and stared at the whiskey bottle in the Ziploc bag. I needed confirmation. I needed lab results. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. Found the name I was looking for, Michael Torres. We'd worked together 20 years ago on a bridge project in Seattle. He'd gone into forensic engineering, analyzing structural failures, testifying in court cases. He'd know someone. The phone rang 3 times before he picked up. Chris Sullivan. It's been a while. Hey, Michael, I need a favor. There was a pause. What kind of favor? I need something tested. Privately, discreetly. No official channels. Another pause, longer this time. Chris, what's going on? I can't explain yet. But I need to know if there's Warfarin in this bottle of whiskey. And I need to know soon. Michael exhaled slowly. Jesus, Chris, can you help me or not? Yeah, I know someone. Private lab in Southeast Portland. They do contract work for law firms, insurance cases. No questions asked. I'll text you the address. Thanks, Michael. I owe you. Chris. He hesitated. Be careful, okay? I ended the call. A minute later, my phone buzzed with the address. That afternoon, I drove to the lab Michael had recommended. It was a nondescript building near the industrial district tucked between a warehouse and a tire shop. No sign out front, just a number on the door. I walked in, carrying the Ziploc bag with the whiskey bottle inside. A woman in a white coat met me at the front desk. She didn't ask my name, didn't ask why I needed the test. Just took the bag, wrote down my phone number, and said, 3 to 5 business days. I'll pay extra for faster results. She looked up. 2 days. But it'll cost you. That's fine. She nodded. We'll call you. I drove home as the sun started to sink behind the hills. The house was empty. Matthew was still in the ICU. Ophelia was at the hospital with him. Grace was staying with Ophelia's sister. I sat alone in my living room, the medication log open on my lap, the math playing out in my head over and over. 6 pills. I'd spent 30 years calculating load-bearing capacities, stress points, the exact moment when a structure would fail under too much weight. This was no different. 6 pills crushed into a cocktail glass were enough to cause internal bleeding until it was too late. And Ophelia had been alone in this house 3 days ago. She'd had access to this exact cabinet. That evening, I'd driven to the private lab Michael had recommended and handed over the whiskey bottle. Call me as soon as you have results, I'd said. Now all I could do was wait. The lab results came 3 days later. I was sitting in my car outside a Safeway engine off grocery list, forgotten on the dashboard. The email notification lit up my phone. No subject line. Just a sender, Pacific Northwest Forensics. I should have waited. Driven home, sat down, prepared myself. But I couldn't. I opened it right there in the parking lot. The first line made my stomach drop. Analysis complete. Warfarin detected. I had to read it twice. 3 times. The concentration, they listed it in milligrams per serving. I didn't understand the number at first. 450 milligrams in a single drink. I stared at that number until my eyes blurred. Then I opened a browser on my phone with shaking hands and typed warfarin safe dose. The results came up immediately. Normal therapeutic dose 2 to 10 milligrams. Daily. Not all at once. Not in a glass of whiskey. 450 milligrams. I did the math in my head, force of habit architect's brain, always calculating, and the answer hit me like a freight train. That wasn't a mistake. That wasn't someone accidentally crushing a pill into the wrong glass. That was lethal. When combined with alcohol, and there'd been plenty of alcohol that night, 450 milligrams of warfarin was enough to cause internal bleeding so severe that by the time anyone realized what was happening, it would be too late. I sat there for, I don't know how long. 10 minutes. 20. People walked past my car with shopping carts. A woman loaded groceries into a minivan 2 spaces over. Someone's kid dropped an ice cream cone and started crying. Normal life, going on all around me, and I couldn't move. Because the lab report sitting on my phone screen wasn't just confirmation. It was proof. Someone had tried to kill me. I drove to the hospital. Matthew was sitting up when I walked into his room. Day 4 since the party. He had color in his face again, fewer tubes. He looked tired, but alive. Hey, Dad, he smiled. They're saying I might get out of here in another day or 2. I pulled a chair close to the bed, sat down, tried to keep my face neutral. That's great news, son. He leaned forward a little, winced. Dad, what happened that night? I felt the weight of the lab report in my jacket pocket. The urge to tell him everything, to pull out my phone, show him the numbers, make him see, was almost overwhelming. But I looked at him sitting there in that hospital bed, still pale, still weak, and I knew I couldn't. Not yet. What do you mean? I said. The doctors keep saying it was some kind of reaction to medication, but I don't take any medication, and they won't give me a straight answer. So I'm asking you. I chose my words carefully. It was some kind of reaction. They're still investigating. To what? They don't know yet. He studied my face. Dad, are you okay? You look... I'm fine, I said quickly. Focus on getting your strength back. That's all that matters right now. He didn't look convinced. But before he could press further, the door opened. Ophelia walked in, carrying a vase of fresh flowers. Honey, you're sitting up. She rushed to his side, set the flowers on the table, kissed his forehead. You scared me so much. I thought I'd lost you. I watched her. The way she touched his hair. The way her voice broke just slightly on the word lost. The tears that welled up in her eyes right on cue. It was flawless. You've been amazing through all of this, Matthew said, squeezing her hand. I don't know what I'd do without you. Ophelia smiled, but her eyes flicked toward me just for a second. Watching. Gauging. I kept my face blank. I'll be right back, she said after a moment. I need to take a call. She left the room, phone already pressed to her ear. Matthew turned to me. She really has been wonderful, Dad. I nodded, didn't trust myself to speak, because I knew the truth now, and I couldn't tell him. After the visit, I met James Fletcher at a coffee shop a few blocks from the hospital. We sat in a corner booth away from the other customers. How's Matthew? He asked. Better, physically. James tilted his head. But I stared into my coffee. Something about that night doesn't add up. What do you mean? I hesitated. Chose my words. I need to know more about Ophelia, Chris, her background, her finances, what she's been doing for the past few years. James leaned back, studying me. You think she's involved? It wasn't a question. I think I need answers before I start making accusations. He was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. What are you going to do? I'm going to hire someone, a private investigator. Yeah, James exhaled slowly. Chris, if you're right about this, you're going to tear your family apart. I know. And if you're wrong, I looked up at him. Then I'll deal with that too. I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot after James left. The sun was starting to set over the West Hills, casting long shadows across the pavement. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number I'd found that morning. 3 rings, then a woman's voice. Morgan Investigations, this is Denise. Ms. Morgan, my name is Chris Sullivan. I need to hire you for a confidential matter. A pause. What kind of matter, Mr. Sullivan? I took a breath. I need you to investigate someone. My daughter-in-law. Another pause, longer this time. Can you tell me why? I have reason to believe she tried to harm me, and I need proof before I can go to the authorities. When can you meet? Tomorrow morning, anywhere you choose. There's a diner on Burnside, the Tin Shed, 8 a.m. I'll be there. She hesitated. Mr. Sullivan, if you're right about this, things are going to get complicated. I know. And if you're wrong, then I'll deal with that too. I ended the call. The parking lot was nearly empty now. The sky had turned a deep orange-pink, the kind of sunset Eleanor used to love. I remembered her standing at the kitchen window of our old apartment 30 years ago, watching the sun go down over the city. She would have told me what to do. She always knew, but she wasn't here, and I couldn't tell Matthew that his wife had tried to kill me. Not yet. Not until I had evidence so solid he couldn't ignore it. Not while he was lying in that hospital bed, weak and grateful for her performance. So I'd made the call I'd been avoiding. The call that would either confirm my worst fear or prove I was losing my mind. I need you to investigate someone, I'd told Denise Morgan, my daughter-in-law, and I need absolute discretion. Denise Morgan's office was on the 3rd floor of an unremarkable building in downtown Portland. She opened the door herself, mid-40s, sharp eyes that seemed to catalog everything about me in 3 seconds. Mr. Sullivan, come in. The office was professional but modest. Filing cabinets, a desk with 2 monitors, certificates on the wall, licenses, PI credentials. A photo of her shaking hands with someone I didn't recognize. She gestured to a chair across from her desk. I sat. "Tell me what's going on," she said. I laid it out carefully. My son poisoned at my housewarming party. Warfarin my medication. The drink meant for me. 6 pills missing from my prescription. My daughter-in-law had access to my house 3 days before. Lab results confirming intentional overdose. I pulled out the documents I'd brought. The lab report. The timeline I'd constructed labeled with dates and details the way I used to label blueprints. Denise took them, scanned each page without expression. "Classic signs of financial motive," she said finally. "Let me run a comprehensive background check." I gave her everything. Ophelia's full name, Ophelia Sinclair Sullivan. Her social security number, which I'd pulled from old tax documents Matthew had left at my house years ago. Date of birth. Current address. "Give me 3 days for preliminary findings," she said. 1 week for the full picture. What's your retainer?" $2,000 up front, then I bill hourly." I wrote the check. 3 days later, my phone rang. "Mr. Sullivan, can you come to my office? I found some things you need to see in person." I drove downtown, parked in the same garage, took the elevator to the 3rd floor. Denise had a file folder waiting on her desk. Thick. She opened it and slid the first set of papers across to me. "Credit reports. Your daughter-in-law is $320,000 in debt." I stared at the number. That's not possible. Matthew sends her money. She works. She makes about $18,000 a year in real estate commissions. The debt started before the marriage, $90,000. It's grown to $320,000 since then. She spread out the documents. Credit card statements. 15 cards all maxed out. Personal loans. Payday loans. Store credit accounts I'd never heard of. I felt sick. Recent applications. Denise continued flipping to another page. Loan requests, all denied. Some with forged income documents. I couldn't speak. She pulled her laptop closer, turned it toward me. Internet search history, last 6 months. The screen showed a list. Google searches recovered from the home computer Matthew and Ophelia shared. How to contest a will, elderly incapacity requirements. Oregon inheriting property from in-laws. Power of attorney, aging parents. Warfarin overdose symptoms. That last one was dated 3 weeks before my housewarming party. I felt cold. "There's one more thing," Denise said. 2 months ago, she met with an attorney. Elder law specialist, Richard Northrup. What did she ask him about? I'm working on that. Attorney-client privilege makes it difficult, but I'll find out. I sat there staring at the papers spread across her desk. The credit reports, the search history, the timeline that lined up too perfectly to be coincidence. $320,000. Search terms about inheritance and incapacity. Warfarin overdose symptoms. A meeting with an elder law attorney 2 months before. She tried to poison me. This isn't just motive, I said quietly. This is premeditation. Denise nodded. Yes, it is. I drove home in a daze. $320,000. My daughter-in-law was drowning in debt, and Matthew had no idea. And in the months before my housewarming party, she'd been researching how to inherit from aging in-laws, how to prove incapacity, and most damning, the symptoms of warfarin overdose. The picture wasn't just clear, it was screaming at me. But I couldn't go to the police yet. Not with just this. Search history could be explained away. Debt wasn't a crime. Meeting with a lawyer wasn't evidence of attempted murder. I needed more. I needed proof she'd taken those pills from my cabinet. Proof she'd crushed them into that drink. Proof that connected her actions directly to what happened to Matthew. Because if I accused her now, if I went to Matthew with what I had, she'd deny everything. She'd cry. She'd play the victim. And my son, still weak in that hospital bed, still grateful for her devoted performance, would believe her. Not me. So I kept driving, kept thinking, kept calculating. The way I always did. I saw Claire Davidson again on a Tuesday, 5 days after I'd hired Denise. I'd stopped by a coffee shop near Matthew and Ophelia's place, supposedly, to pick up Grace after an afternoon at the park. Ophelia had texted me the time. Casual, normal. What I saw through the window stopped me cold. Claire was sitting in a corner booth with Ophelia. Not just sitting, talking, leaning in close. The kind of conversation you have when you don't want anyone else to hear. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment trying to process it. Claire, the woman Ophelia had introduced at my party as an old friend, a wedding planner who'd helped with their ceremony. The woman who'd asked too many questions about my house, my finances, my property value. She was meeting with Ophelia. I walked into the coffee shop keeping my head down and chose a table on the opposite side. Picked up a discarded newspaper from the chair beside me and held it up like I was reading. Old school, but it worked. Through the gap between the pages, I watched them. Ophelia was showing Claire something on her phone. Both of them leaned in heads close together. Claire pulled out a small notebook, the kind journalists use, and started writing. Their body language was all wrong. This wasn't two friends catching up over lattes. This was business, serious business. The conversation lasted maybe 15 minutes. Then Ophelia glanced at her watch, said something, and they both stood. No hug, no warm goodbye. Just a nod, and they walked out in opposite directions. I waited until Ophelia's car pulled out of the lot. Then I made a decision I knew was probably stupid. I followed Claire. She drove a gray sedan. Nothing flashy. She took side streets, not in a hurry, and I stayed 2 cars back, heart pounding like I was in some kind of spy movie. I felt ridiculous. But I kept driving. 10 minutes later, she turned onto my street. Not Matthew's street, mine. She parked across from my house. Engine off. Just sat there. I pulled over 2 blocks down, grabbed my phone, and dialed James Fletcher. James, it's Chris. I need a favor. Can I use your side yard for a few minutes? Sure, why? I'll explain later. I cut through the alley behind his house, came up through the side gate, and crouched behind the fence. I had a clear view of the street. Claire was still in her car, staring at my house. She pulled out her phone, started taking pictures. Front angle, side angle, the driveway, the garage. She wasn't just looking. She was documenting. 20 minutes. She sat there for 20 minutes, taking notes, taking photos, studying my house like she was appraising it, or planning something. Finally, she started the engine and drove away. I stayed crouched behind James's fence until her taillights disappeared around the corner. I pulled out my phone and called Denise. Mr. Sullivan, there's someone else involved. A woman named Claire Davidson. She was at my party. Ophelia introduced her as a friend, said she helped plan their wedding. But I just saw them meeting in secret. And now Claire's outside my house taking pictures. Denise was quiet for a moment. Describe her. Early 40s, professional looking, gray sedan. She spent 20 minutes photographing my house from the street. I'll add her to the investigation, see what I can find. I hesitated. How many people are working with Ophelia? Let me dig deeper, Mr. Sullivan. I'll call you soon. She hung up. I stood there in James's yard, staring at the empty street where Claire's car had been. It wasn't just Ophelia anymore. She had help, a professional. Someone careful enough to surveil my property without getting caught, except I had caught her. 2 women, 1 plan, and me standing alone in the growing dark, trying to figure out how to protect myself from people who'd already proven they'd cross any line. 2 weeks after the incident, I got the call I'd been waiting for. Matthew was being discharged. I drove to the hospital, my mind still churning with everything I'd learned, the evidence I couldn't share. Not yet. The nurse met me in the hallway outside his room with a clipboard full of discharge instructions, medications, follow-up appointments, and ironically, guidelines for monitoring anticoagulant levels. I signed where she pointed and went inside. Matthew was sitting on the edge of the bed, dressed in the clothes I'd brought him the day before. He looked pale, tired, but alive. "Ready to go home, son?" He nodded. "More than ready." The drive to his house was quiet. Matthew stared out the window, not saying much. I kept glancing over at him, trying to read his face. Finally, he spoke. Thanks for being there, Dad. I don't remember much from that night, but I know you were there. My throat tightened. Always, son. When we pulled into the driveway, Ophelia rushed out before I'd even turned off the engine. Honey. She pulled Matthew's door open, practically yanked him out of the car. Careful. Don't tire yourself. Let me help you. She wrapped an arm around his waist, guiding him toward the house like he was made of glass. Grace came running out behind her. Daddy, you're home. She stopped short when she saw how pale he was, looked up at me. Grandpa, is Daddy all better? I crouched down, took her small hand. He's getting there, sweetheart. He just needs rest. Inside, I helped Matthew to the bedroom. He sank onto the bed with a sigh, leaning back against the pillows. For a moment, it was just the two of us. Dad, he said quietly. I keep trying to remember that night. What did I drink? What happened? Every instinct I had screamed at me to tell him. To pull out my phone, show him the lab report, the credit statements, the search history. To make him see what I'd seen. But I looked at him sitting there pale and exhausted, and I knew I couldn't. Not yet. Not while he was this weak. What if I was wrong? What if accusing Ophelia tore him apart? The doctors said it was warfare and I said carefully. Somehow you ingested it. They're still investigating how. Don't force yourself to remember. Just focus on getting your strength back. Matthew frowned. But I don't take any medications. How could I have? These things happen sometimes. Medical mysteries. I forced a smile. What matters is you're okay now. He stared at me for a long moment, like he knew I wasn't telling him everything. Then he closed his eyes. I'm so tired, Stockton, I said. I'll go downstairs with Grace. In the kitchen, I made tea. Ophelia moved around me, tidying, checking her phone, putting on a show of domestic normalcy. Then I heard her voice from the next room. Low. Tense. The door was cracked open. She thought I was outside with Grace. I froze by the kettle listening. I told you it went wrong, she hissed into the phone. He's still alive. We need another plan. My blood turned to ice. I'm too risky right now. Everyone's watching. We wait. No, I can't talk here. The call ended abruptly. A second later, Ophelia walked back into the kitchen, her face bright and cheerful again. Dad, you should stay for dinner. I'm making Matthew's favorite. I turned, forcing my face into something neutral. My heart was pounding so hard I thought she'd hear it. No thanks, I said. I should let Matthew rest. Too many people around isn't good for recovery. She tilted her head, studying me. You're probably right. He needs quiet. I hugged Grace goodbye and walked out to my car. I sat in the driver's seat, hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. She'd said it clearly. We need another plan. We, meaning her and whoever she'd been talking to. Claire, probably. And another plan meant she hadn't stopped. Whatever had happened at my party, the poisoned drink, the 6 pills crushed into whiskey, that was just the first attempt. My son was home recovering, trusting his wife completely. And I was the only one who knew she was planning the next move. I couldn't just gather evidence anymore. I had to stop her. Ophelia called me 3 days after Matthew came home. Her voice was sweet as honey. The kind of sweet that makes you check for poison. Dad, I feel just terrible about what happened at the party. I want to help you. Make it up to you. I stood in my kitchen phone pressed to my ear and said nothing for a moment. Let the silence stretch. Waited to see what she'd say next. I know you've been through so much, she continued, worrying about Matthew. And I feel like I haven't been there for you the way I should have been. Interesting choice of words. That's kind of you, Ophelia, I said carefully. Matthew mentioned your gutters need cleaning before winter sets in. I have a ladder and I'm free this Saturday. Let me take care of that for you. Matthew had mentioned no such thing. I'd cleaned those gutters myself 3 weeks ago. Every downspout clear, every seam checked. But I kept my voice neutral. That's very thoughtful. It's the least I can do. You've been so worried about Matthew. Let me take some burden off you, Dad. The word Dad had never sounded more calculated. Saturday works, I said. What time? 10 a.m. I'll bring my ladder from our garage. The good one, aluminum extension, 24 feet. Professional grade. Professional grade. She wanted me to know it was sturdy, reliable, safe. Sounds good. I'll see you then. I hung up. Then I stood there in my kitchen for a full minute, staring at the phone in my hand. She was planning something. I immediately called James Fletcher. James, I need a favor. Name it. Saturday morning, can you happen to stop by my house around 10:15? Maybe you forgot a tool here last week, something like that. There was a pause. Chris, what's going on? Ophelia's coming over to help clean my gutters. And you think, I don't know what I think, but I have a bad feeling. Just be there. Please. I'll be there. Saturday morning, I woke up at 7, made coffee, walked through the house twice, checking sight lines from the windows. At 9:30, I set my phone on the windowsill in the living room angled toward the front yard, where the gutters ran along the roofline. I opened the camera app, started recording video, and made sure the lens had a clear view of the driveway and the section of wall where a ladder would most likely go. Then I went outside and waited. Ophelia arrived at 10 o'clock sharp. Her car pulled into my driveway with an aluminum extension ladder strapped to the roof rack. She climbed out wearing fitted jeans, work boots, and brown leather gloves. A canvas tool bag hung from her shoulder. She looked the part. Competent. Helpful. The devoted daughter-in-law. Good morning, Dad. She smiled brightly. Beautiful day for home maintenance, isn't it? Morning, Ophelia. She walked to the back of her car, unstrapped the ladder with practiced efficiency, and carried it to the front of the house. Set it carefully against the wall, just below the section of gutter that ran above the porch. You stay down here, okay? She patted my shoulder, condescending, gentle. Your balance isn't what it used to be. We don't want another hospital trip. The words landed like a slap, but I smiled. You're right. I appreciate you doing this. Of course. She adjusted the ladder, tested its stability with a little shake, then started climbing. The tool bag swung from her shoulder as she ascended. She stopped about halfway up, maybe 12 feet off the ground, and looked into the gutter. Oh my goodness, Dad. These are so clogged. This is going to take a while. Take your time, I called up. I'm right here if you need anything. She nodded, pulled a small hand rake from the tool bag, and made a show of scraping at the gutter. Leaves fell. She tossed them down into the flower bed below. I waited until she was focused on the roofline. Then I walked casually back toward the front door, stepped inside, and moved to the window where my phone was recording. Through the glass, I had a perfect view, and what I saw made my blood freeze. Ophelia wasn't cleaning the gutters. Her hands were on the ladder, working the locking mechanism where the two sections of the extension ladder overlapped. I'd worked with ladders for 40 years. I knew how they were built, how they were supposed to lock, how they failed when something went wrong. She pulled a small wrench from the tool bag, a ratcheting socket wrench, the kind you'd use for precision work. She started loosening the bolts that held the extension sections together. Not removing them, just loosening them. 2 turns, 3. Then she moved to the safety pins, small spring-loaded clips that locked the ladder's joints in place when extended. She pressed the release, slid them halfway out, and left them hanging loose in their holes. Not enough to make the ladder collapse immediately, but enough that under the right weight or the right shift in balance the joints would give. The ladder would fold, and whoever was on it would fall. From 15 feet up at my age, that kind of fall wasn't just dangerous. It was potentially lethal. She finished her work in less than 5 minutes, slipped the wrench back into the tool bag, went back to scraping at the gutters like nothing had happened. Then she called down, Dad, can you come hold the base of the ladder for me? It feels a little unstable up here. I didn't move. She called again, louder. Dad, are you there? I stayed at the window, silent, watching. She looked down, frowning, shifted her weight on the ladder. The frame creaked but held. She'd sabotaged it carefully. It wouldn't fail under her weight, not while she was climbing down. But if someone heavier got on it, or if someone stood at the base and it shifted the wrong way, she climbed down, slowly testing each rung, and stepped onto the ground. Dad, she called toward the house, voice tinged with concern. I stood at the window, heart-pounding, phone still recording. She was on my property, in my front yard, and she'd just spent 5 minutes rigging a ladder to collapse, hoping I'd climb it, or stand beneath it, or do something stupid enough to finish what the poisoned drink hadn't. She thought I was too old to notice, too trusting to suspect, too blind to see. But I'd seen everything. I was reaching for the door handle, trying to figure out how to refuse her request. Without revealing, I'd been watching from inside, when I heard the rumble of an engine. James Fletcher's pickup truck turned into my driveway, right on schedule. He parked, climbed out, and waved. Hey, Chris, stopped by to check that porch railing we talked about last week. We'd never talked about any railing. But James was playing his part perfectly. He glanced up at Ophelia on the ladder. Oh, wow, home maintenance day. Ophelia looked down, and I caught the flash of annoyance in her eyes before she covered it with a smile. Just helping Dad clean his gutters. I've got it under control. James walked over, hands in his pockets, the posture of a man who'd spent 40 years on construction sites. Hey, before you go any higher, let me check that ladder real quick. Old habit. I've seen too many accidents over the years. Safety first, you know. It's fine, Ophelia said, her smile tightening. I've used this ladder 100 times. Humor me, James said, still friendly, still casual, but something in his voice made it clear he wasn't asking. Ophelia climbed down, slowly stepped to the side, and gestured at the ladder with a tight little flourish. Be my guest. James moved to the base of the ladder, gripped the sides, shook it gently, then harder. His face went dark. Chris, he said quietly. Come here. Look at this. I stepped out of the house, walked over, tried to keep my face neutral. James pointed to the joints where the ladder's 2 sections overlapped. These bolts are barely holding. The safety pins are gone. This whole load-bearing joint is compromised. He demonstrated applying pressure to one side. The ladder wobbled more than it should have. Way more. If anyone climbed this thing past the halfway point, James said, his voice hard, it would collapse. And from this height, we're talking serious injury, broken bones, worse. I looked at Ophelia. She was standing with her arms crossed, jaw set. I don't understand, I said, keeping my voice confused. Ophelia, was the ladder like this when you got it out? She hesitated. Just for a second. Then she shook her head. I don't know. It was fine the last time I used it. It must have been like that already. I grabbed it from our garage. Maybe it's been sitting too long. Maybe something rusted or... Ophelia. James interrupted. He crouched down by the ladder, ran his finger along one of the bolt heads. Look at this. He stood, held his finger up for us to see. Fresh metal dust. These scratches are new. Tool marks. See where the wrench gripped? These bolts were loosened intentionally, recently. The air went still. Ophelia's face flushed. What are you saying? I'm saying someone sabotaged this ladder. Are you? Her voice rose, shook. Are you accusing me of something? James didn't answer, just looked at her. Ophelia turned to me and I watched her eyes fill with tears. Real tears. Or a damn good imitation. Dad, she said, voice breaking. You can't think I would after Matthew almost died. You think I'd try to hurt you. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I said very calmly, I think you should go home, Ophelia. Her face twisted. You're going to believe him over me. I'm your son's wife. I'm family. Boy, I said, "Kana." She stared at me. Then she grabbed her tool bag, yanked it off the ground, and turned to James. Matthew is going to hear about this. The way you people treated me. Drive carefully, I said. She threw the tool bag into the back seat of her car, grabbed the ladder, shoved it onto the roof rack without strapping it properly, and got in. The engine roared to life. She reversed hard tires squealing and sped out of the driveway. James and I stood there in the sudden silence. "Chris," he said finally. "What the hell is going on?" I walked back into the house, grabbed my phone from the windowsill, and came back out. I recorded the whole thing. I pulled up the video, handed him the phone. James watched. His face went pale. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. On the screen, Ophelia's hands moved methodically over the ladder joints. Wrench, bolts, safety pins, every second crystal clear. James handed the phone back. "This is attempted murder. You need to call the police." "Not yet. Chris, I need more than this." Or she just tried to. "I need enough proof that Matthew will believe me," I said. "If I go to him with just this, she'll cry. She'll say it's a misunderstanding. She'll say the ladder was already broken and she didn't notice. He loves her, James. He'll want to believe her version." James stared at me. "And what if she tries something else while you're waiting? Then I'll be ready." "Chris, I won't go to my son with half a story," I said. "I need proof so overwhelming he can't ignore it." James shook his head. "You're taking a hell of a risk." "I know." He left a few minutes later. Told me to call him if I needed anything. Told me to be careful. I stood alone in my driveway, phone in my hand. I had the lab results proving she'd poisoned my drink. I had the financial records showing her desperate debt. I had the internet search history about inheritance and incapacity. And now I had video of her sabotaging a ladder trying to cause me serious injury. Or worse. But James was right about one thing. She'd just tried again. And desperate, calculating people like Ophelia didn't stop until they succeeded, or until they were stopped. I needed something irrefutable. Something even Matthew's love for his wife couldn't blind him to. Denise Morgan called me early Tuesday morning, 4 days after the ladder incident. Her voice had a tone I'd never heard before, urgency mixed with confusion. "Chris, we need to talk about Claire Davidson. Can you come to my office? This isn't something I can explain over the phone." I grabbed my keys. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Before I tell you the truth about Claire Davidson, I need to hear from you. What do you think is really happening here? What's her real role in all of this? Comment below with your theory. I want to see who figured it out." Quick reminder, what follows contains some fictionalized details for educational purposes. You can exit now if you prefer. Denise had a thick file folder on her desk. When I walked in, her laptop open beside it. She didn't waste time. "I ran a full background check on Claire Davidson like you asked." I sat down. "And she's helping Ophelia, right?" Denise hesitated, looked at me carefully. "Not exactly." "What do you mean, not exactly?" Chris, Claire Davidson is a licensed private investigator." The words didn't register at first. I stared at her. "What?" She turned the laptop around. On the screen was a professional licensing database. Claire Davidson, private investigator, license number 47,832, status active, years in business 15. Below that were business registration documents. A business address in Southeast Portland. Client reviews, dozens of them, all 5 stars. Membership in the Oregon Association of Licensed Investigators. Her specialties: domestic cases, infidelity investigations, financial fraud, asset tracking. "I don't understand," I said slowly. "I saw them together, at that coffee shop. They were meeting, planning something." "That's what confused me too," Denise said. "Why would a private investigator be meeting with Ophelia?" So I kept digging. She pulled a stack of bank statements from the file, slid them across the desk. "Look at this. 3 months ago, March 15th. I scanned the page. A payment to Claire Davidson Investigations. $5,000. listed as a retainer. And the account holder, my chest tightened. Matthew Sullivan, not a joint account. Not one Ophelia had access to. Matthew's personal checking account, his teacher's credit union. The one he'd had since before they got married. Matthew hired her, I said. My voice sounded far away. 3 months before your housewarming party. I looked up at Denise. Why didn't he tell me? I don't know. But here's what I do know. She tapped the bank statement. Claire isn't working for Ophelia. She's working against her. Your son hired a private investigator to look into his own wife. The room felt too small suddenly, too hot. I thought back through the last few weeks. Every interaction. Every moment I'd misunderstood. Claire at my party. I'd thought she was Ophelia's friend, her accomplice, but she wasn't. She'd been observing Ophelia, watching her, gathering evidence. Claire photographing my house. I'd thought she was casing it, helping Ophelia plan something. But she wasn't. She'd been documenting my assets, building a case. Claire meeting Ophelia at that coffee shop. I'd thought they were conspiring, but they weren't. Claire had been interrogating her, or following her, or both. I got it all backwards, I said quietly. Denise nodded. It looks like your son suspected something 3 months ago. Enough to hire professional help. Then why keep it from me? That's the question. She closed the laptop. What did Matthew find, and why did he feel like he couldn't tell his own father? I stood up. My legs felt unsteady. I need to talk to him. Chris. Denise's voice stopped me at the door. Be careful. If Matthew's been investigating Ophelia for 3 months, there's more going on here than we know. I sat in my car in the parking lot, engine off, hands gripping the steering wheel. Matthew had hired Claire 3 months ago. 3 months before my housewarming party. 3 months before he nearly died from drinking a poisoned cocktail that was meant for me. The timeline made my head spin. What had he discovered in those 3 months? Had he found the debt? The search history about inheritance and incapacity. Had Claire told him what Ophelia was planning? And if he knew why? Hadn't he warned me? Was he trying to protect me? Gathering evidence before making accusations he couldn't take back. Or was he hoping he was wrong? Hoping the woman he loved wasn't capable of what the evidence suggested. I thought about the night of the party. The way Matthew had stood behind me. The way he'd picked up that glass from the side table. The way he'd drunk it without hesitation. Had it been an accident? Or had he known what was in it? No, that was insane. He wouldn't have. But then why hire Claire 3 months earlier? Why investigate Ophelia in secret? My son had known something was wrong. Something serious enough to spend $5,000 on a private investigator. But not serious enough, or maybe too serious, to tell me. I pulled out my phone. Stared at Matthew's name in my contacts. My thumb hovered over the call button. Then I put the phone down. I wasn't ready, not yet. Because if I called him now, if I asked him why he'd hired Claire, what he'd found, why he'd kept it from me, I'd have to hear the answer. And I wasn't sure I could handle the truth. Not if it meant my son had known his wife was dangerous. Not if it meant he'd suspected she might try to hurt me. Not if it meant he'd kept that knowledge to himself while she poisoned a drink at my party. I started the car and pulled out of the parking lot. I needed answers. But for the first time in my life, I was afraid of what those answers might be. I couldn't wait any longer. The discovery that Matthew had hired Claire Davidson haunted me through 2 sleepless nights. I needed to know what my son had found and why he'd kept it from me. 2 days after meeting with Denise, I found myself sitting in my car outside Lincoln High School, where Matthew taught English to juniors and seniors, trying to figure out how to start a conversation I didn't know how to have. The lunch bell rang at 12:30. Students poured out of the building, laughing, shouting, heading for the parking lot or the food trucks parked along the street. I watched them feeling old, feeling out of place. Then I saw Matthew. He came through a side door, carrying a canvas messenger bag, heading for his car. He didn't see me until I got out and walked toward him. He stopped. Dad. Hi, son. His face shifted confusion, then worry. What are you doing here? Is everything okay? I need to talk to you. Just a few minutes. Can we grab coffee? He checked his watch, hesitated. Okay. There's a place on the corner. I have 30 minutes. The coffee shop was small, local, the kind with mismatched furniture and student art on the walls. We ordered at the counter, sat down at a table near the window. Matthew set his bag on the floor, wrapped his hands around his cup. What's going on? You look worried. I didn't know how to start, so I just said it. Matthew, I need to ask you something. Have you noticed anything unusual about Ophelia lately? His face went blank, then defensive. What do you mean? Financial pressure, changes in behavior. Anything that seems off. We're fine, Dad. His voice was careful, guarded. Why are you asking? I'm just concerned. After what happened at the party, the doctors said it was some kind of drug interaction. He said it too quickly. A freak accident. I leaned forward. Was it? Matthew went still, stared at his coffee. The silence stretched too long. What else would it be? He said finally. I wanted to ask him about Claire, about the $5,000 payment, about why he'd hired a private investigator 3 months before my party. But something in his eyes stopped me. He knew something. I could see it. The way he wouldn't meet my gaze, the way his jaw was set, the way his hands gripped that coffee cup like he was holding on to something he didn't want to let go of. But he wasn't ready to talk, or didn't want to, or was protecting something he couldn't say out loud. I tried a different approach. Shot that night at the party, I said. Do you remember anything? Which glass did you drink from? Another long pause. Matthew stared down at his coffee like he could find answers in it. No, he said quietly. I've tried to remember. It's just blank. I felt dizzy. Then I woke up in the hospital. You picked up a glass from the side table, I said. Do you remember why? He looked up. Something flashed in his eyes, recognition, fear, I couldn't tell. Does it matter which glass I drank from? It might. He stared at me for a moment. Then he checked his watch and stood up. Dad, I really need to get back to class. We can talk about this another time. Matthew, another time. His voice was firm, final. Students are waiting. He grabbed his bag and walked out. I sat there alone, watching him through the window. Matthew crossed the street, heading back toward the school. Then he stopped, pulled out his phone, made a call. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but I could see his body language, tense, urgent. One hand pressed to his forehead like he had a headache. Pacing in a tight circle on the sidewalk. Who was he calling? Ophelia, Claire, someone else I didn't know about. He talked for maybe 2 minutes. Then he hung up, stood there for a moment staring at the phone and walked back into the school building. I sat in that coffee shop for another 10 minutes staring at my untouched cup. My son was hiding something. That much was clear. But what was he protecting? Me. By keeping secrets, by gathering evidence on his own, by hiring Claire Davidson 3 months before my party. Or was he protecting Ophelia? Out of love, out of denial, out of some misplaced loyalty to a woman who might be trying to kill me? Or was he protecting himself from a truth too terrible to face, from the knowledge that his wife, the mother of his child, was capable of something unthinkable? I'd come here looking for answers, and I'd left with more questions. But one thing was certain. Matthew's silence was more dangerous than Ophelia's schemes, because if my son knew something and wasn't telling me, then whatever he'd discovered 3 months ago was either too terrible to share or too complicated for me to understand. Either way, I was running out of time. Ophelia had tried twice. The poisoned drink, the sabotaged ladder. She would try again. And if Matthew knew that if he'd suspected it for 3 months and still hadn't warned me, then I couldn't wait for him to find the courage to speak. I had to act. Now. Denise Morgan called me 2 days later on a Sunday morning. I was in the garage pretending to organize tools when my phone rang. Her voice was tight. "Chris, I found something. It's worse than we thought. Can you come to my office right now?" I was there in 20 minutes. Denise had her laptop open, papers spread across her desk. She didn't say hello, just gestured for me to sit. I got access to Ophelia's phone records, text message backups. There's someone else involved. My stomach dropped. Who? She turned the laptop around. On the screen was a text message thread. The contact name was just Christine. No last name. Christine Sinclair, 32 years old, lives in Seattle. Denise pulled up a driver's license photo. The woman in the picture looked like Ophelia, younger, sharper features, but definitely related. She's Ophelia's sister. I stared at the photo. I didn't know Ophelia had a sister. Most people don't. They're not close publicly, but privately. Denise slid a stack of printed messages across the desk. These started 6 months ago. I picked up the first page. The earliest messages were from February 4 months ago. Christine had asked Ophelia if she'd talked to that lawyer yet. Ophelia said yes, said the lawyer told her that if they could prove I was incapable of managing my own affairs, power would transfer to Matthew. And then through Matthew to her. Christine had asked what would happen if I didn't cooperate. Ophelia's response made my blood run cold. There were ways to make someone look incompetent. My hands started shaking. The next set of messages was from March. 3 months before my party. Christine told Ophelia she'd found a source, someone who could get what Ophelia needed. But it would cost $800. Ophelia told her to do it. Said she'd send the money. A day later, Christine confirmed she'd mailed it. No trail she'd written. Denise pointed at another document on her desk. I traced that $800. Ophelia sent it via money order. Christine used it to buy warfarin from an online pharmacy in Mexico. She showed me the receipts. Shipping confirmation to Christine's address in Seattle. Then a second shipping record. Christine had mailed a package to Ophelia 1 week later. She bought the poison, I said quietly, and shipped it to Ophelia. Yes. I flipped to the next page. These messages were from late May, 2 weeks before my housewarming party. Christine had asked if Ophelia received the package. Ophelia said yes. Said this Saturday my party would be the perfect opportunity. Christine told her to be careful, to make it look natural, a heart attack, a stroke, something that fit my age. Ophelia had written back that she knew what she was doing. I couldn't breathe. The next messages were from June 9th. The day after the party, Christine had asked what happened. Multiple question marks. Frantic. Ophelia told her something had gone wrong, that Matthew had drunk the poison instead of me. Christine's response, all caps disbelief, asked if Ophelia was kidding. Asked if Matthew was okay. Ophelia said he was in the hospital, that the doctors were calling it warfarin poisoning, that he'd recover. Christine called her an idiot, said it was a disaster. Ophelia wrote back that she knew, told Christine to delete everything, to stop texting her. Christine's last message in that thread, too late for that. They tried to delete it, Denise said, but I recovered everything from cloud backup. I set the papers down. My hands were shaking too badly to hold them. They planned it together. Denise nodded. Christine supplied the means. Ophelia executed. Classic conspiracy. There was one more set of messages. From 3 days ago after the latter incident, Christine had asked if Ophelia had done it, if she'd finished what she started. Ophelia said I hadn't taken the bait, that my neighbor had shown up, that she thought I suspected something. Christine told her to stop, said she was going to get caught. But Ophelia said she couldn't stop. Not now. That I was investigating. That she had to finish it before I found everything. Christine's final message, "You're insane." I looked up at Denise. My throat was tight. This is premeditated murder. conspiracy to commit murder. Yes. And Christine's involvement means if we go to the authorities, both sisters will face charges. Do we have enough? Denise leaned back in her chair. For the police, absolutely. The text messages, the money order, the pharmacy records, the shipping confirmations, it's all documented. They can't explain this away. And for Matthew, she studied my face. That's your decision, Chris. You're his father. You know him better than I do. Will he believe this? Or will he find a way to rationalize it? I didn't answer, because I didn't know. I drove home with a folder full of printed messages on the passenger seat. It wasn't just Ophelia. Her sister had helped her, had found someone to sell them illegal drugs, had coached her through the planning, had known exactly what Ophelia was going to do at my party, and had only been upset when the wrong person drank the poison. 2 sisters. One inheritance they'd already spent in their minds. $320,000 in debt between the 2 of them. Probably more. They'd been planning this for months, since February at least, maybe longer. They'd bought warfarin from Mexico, shipped it across state lines, planned the execution down to the day and the hour. And when it failed, when Matthew collapsed instead of me, Ophelia hadn't stopped. She'd tried again with the latter. And somewhere in Seattle, Christine Sinclair was waiting to hear whether her sister had finally succeeded. I pulled into my driveway and sat there, engine off, staring at that folder. I had everything now. The financial records showing Ophelia's debt. The search history about inheritance and incapacity. The video of her sabotaging the latter. And now these messages, proof that it was all premeditated. Proof that she hadn't acted alone. The question was, what was I going to do with it? The social worker arrived on Thursday afternoon, 3 days after my meeting with Denise about Christine. I'd been expecting this. It was Ophelia's next logical move, but seeing the government vehicle pull into my driveway still sent a chill down my spine. I opened the door before she could ring the bell. She was in her late 30s, professionally dressed, carrying a clipboard, and wearing an official agency badge. Mr. Sullivan, I'm Sharon Ellis from Adult Protective Services. We received a report of concern regarding your welfare. May I come in? I'd prepared for this. Of course, please. I led her into the living room and offered tea. She accepted, setting her clipboard on the coffee table as she sat down. I brought 2 cups from the kitchen and settled into the chair across from her. Sharon opened her folder. I want to be direct with you. The report alleges several issues: possible self-neglect, confusion, memory problems, and unsafe living conditions. The reporter expressed concern that you may not be capable of living independently. I kept my voice steady. I understand. May I ask who filed this report? Reports can be submitted anonymously. Sharon said, her tone neutral but professional. But I can tell you this came from a family member concerned for your welfare. My daughter-in-law, Ophelia. Sharon's expression remained carefully neutral. I can't confirm the source, but I'm here to assess the situation objectively. I understand. Where would you like to start? She stood. A walkthrough of the home, if that's all right. I led her through each room. The living room was clean and organized, no clutter, no safety hazards. The kitchen was well stocked with fresh food, everything in its place. In the bathroom, medications were stored carefully in the cabinet, all properly labeled with current dates. Sharon photographed the medication labels and made notes. You're on warfarin and several cardiac medications. All current prescriptions. Yes, my cardiologist monitors everything. The bedroom was tidy. The bed made no issues. Sharon took notes throughout the entire tour. Back in the living room, she reviewed her clipboard. Mr. Sullivan, your home is in excellent condition. I see no signs of self-neglect or unsafe living conditions. Thank you. I should also mention that I have some documentation that might be relevant. I retrieved the folder I'd prepared, knowing this day would come. Inside, a recent medical clearance from Dr. Raymond Hughes, my cardiologist, dated 1 week prior. Results from a cognitive assessment, a mini mental state examination, showing a perfect score of 30 out of 30. Financial records showing balanced bank accounts, bills paid on time, meticulous organization. Property tax receipts, current insurance policies, home maintenance records. Sharon examined each document carefully. This is very thorough. Most people I visit aren't prepared with this level of documentation. I'm a retired architect. Documentation is a habit. The medical clearance and cognitive test are particularly helpful. These show no signs of incapacity. She closed the folder. Mr. Sullivan, based on what I've observed today and the documentation you've provided, I see no evidence supporting the concerns in the report. I leaned forward slightly. Sharon, I need to tell you something. I believe this report was filed for purposes of retaliation. Her pen paused over the paper. Retaliation for what? Sorry, may I show you something? It's relevant to this investigation. She nodded slowly. Go ahead. I opened my laptop and brought up the files I'd been carrying like a stone in my chest for weeks. First, the lab results from the whiskey bottle. This shows 450 milligrams of warfarin detected in a drink at my housewarming party. That's a lethal dose when combined with alcohol. Sharon's professional mask slipped slightly as she read the document. Next, the video from my phone. This shows Ophelia loosening the bolts on a ladder and removing safety pins from the load-bearing joints. I played the footage. Sharon watched without speaking. Then the text messages between Ophelia and Christine Sinclair recovered from cloud backup. Planning, purchasing, the disaster after the party. Sharon read each one twice. Finally, the financial documents showing Ophelia's $320,000 debt, compiled by Denise Morgan's investigation. I handed her a timeline document, everything organized chronologically, from February to the present day. Sharon set down her pen. Mr. Sullivan, are you saying your daughter-in-law tried to poison you? I'm saying the evidence suggests it. And when that didn't work, she tried to sabotage a ladder. And when that didn't work either, she filed a false report with your agency to make me appear incapacitated. Have you contacted the police? Not yet. I've been gathering evidence. But yes, that's my next step. Sharon closed her notebook. Her professional demeanor remained, but something had shifted in her eyes. Mr. Sullivan, you are one of the most competent individuals I've assessed in 10 years with APS. Your home is safe, your mental status is sound, and your affairs are in impeccable order. This case will be closed as unfounded. Thank you. She stood gathering her materials. However, I'm required by law to report suspected elder abuse to our investigative unit and to law enforcement. What you've shown me constitutes financial exploitation, attempted harm, and filing a false report. These are criminal matters. My chest tightened. I understand. I'll be forwarding my assessment and your evidence to Detective Eric Jensen with the Portland Police Bureau. Expect a call from him within 24 hours. I'll be ready. After Sharon Ellis left, I stood at the window watching her car pull away her official report, clearing my name already being filed electronically. Ophelia's attempt to use the system against me had backfired. Instead of making me look incapacitated, she'd triggered a formal investigation targeting herself, and within 24 hours the police would be involved. Everything I'd gathered, every piece of evidence, every carefully documented detail, was about to become part of a criminal case. The house I'd bought as a refuge had become the center of an investigation, but for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to relief. I wasn't alone anymore. The system was finally listening. Detective Eric Jensen called at 8:47 the next morning. I know the exact time because I'd been awake since 5 drinking coffee and staring at my phone waiting. Mr. Sullivan, this is Detective Jensen with Portland Police Bureau. Adult Protective Services forwarded your case to me. I need you to come to the station. Can you be here before 10? I'll be there at 9:50. I arrived at the precinct 10 minutes early. The building was institutional gray, all hard surfaces and fluorescent lighting. A uniformed officer directed me to the detective division on the 3rd floor. Detective Eric Jensen met me in the hallway. Mid-40s, experienced eyes, professional demeanor. He shook my hand firmly. Mr. Sullivan, thank you for coming in. He led me into an interview room. Plain walls, metal table, recording equipment mounted in the corner. The chair was uncomfortable by design. Jensen sat across from me and opened a folder. I've reviewed Sharon Ellis's report and the preliminary evidence. We need to go through everything systematically. This may take several hours. I have time. I'd brought everything organized in labeled folders. Jensen worked through each piece methodically, taking notes, asking clarifying questions. First, the lab results from the whiskey bottle. 450 milligrams of warfarin, Jensen read aloud. Chain of custody documented. This is solid. Next, Matthew's medical records from Providence Portland Medical Center. Admission date June 8th. Diagnosis warfarin poisoning. Treatment notes showing vitamin K administration and blood transfusions. Then my prescription records. 6 pills missing from your medication, Jensen noted. Refilled May 26th. You keep detailed logs. I'm careful with my health. The timeline showing Ophelia's access to my house 3 days before the party. The video from my phone showing her loosening the ladder bolts and removing safety pins, timestamp, and metadata intact. Denise Morgan's investigation report, $320,000 in debt internet search history, showing queries about inheritance incapacity and warfarin overdose symptoms. The text messages between Ophelia and Christine Sinclair recovered from cloud backup. Jensen read through them twice. Financial documents showing the $800 money order pharmacy records from Mexico shipping confirmation to Seattle. Witness statement from James Fletcher regarding the latter incident. Jensen reviewed everything twice. His pen moved steadily across his notepad. Finally, he looked up. This is substantial evidence, very well documented. I'm an architect. I understand the importance of structural integrity of evidence. Jensen closed the folder. We'll need to interview your son. He's also a victim. He needs to know what's happening. My chest tightened. He doesn't know. Not all of it. He drank the poison meant for you. He's both a witness and a victim. We need his statement. Can I be there when you tell him, Chikongso? Actually, I'd prefer that. Jensen reached for his phone. Let me call him now. He dialed. The call connected on speaker. Matthew Sullivan. Yes. Matthew's voice cautious. This is Detective Eric Jensen, Portland Police Bureau. I need you to come to the station regarding an ongoing investigation. No, you're not in trouble. It concerns the incident at your father's party. Can you come now? A pause. Matthew's confusion transmitted clearly through the line. Yes. I can be there in 45 minutes. Ask for me at the front desk. Thank you. Jensen hung up and looked at me. This won't be easy for him. I know. We waited. Jensen reviewed the files again. I drank bad coffee from a styrofoam cup and watched the clock. 43 minutes later, there was a knock on the door. A uniformed officer opened it. Matthew stepped inside. He saw me first. Dad, what's going on? Why are the police involved? Jensen stood. Please sit down, Mr. Sullivan. I need to explain some things. Matthew sat slowly, looking between us. Jensen opened the folder and began laying out the evidence piece by piece, building the case like an architect builds a structure. The lab results, the missing pills, the debt, the text messages, the video. I watched my son's face change as the evidence accumulated. First, disbelief. This has to be a mistake. Then shock. That's not possible. Then horror. The glass. I drank Dad's glass. Then denial. There must be another explanation. Finally, painful acceptance. Matthew's hands shook. Tears tracked down his face. He looked at me across the table. She tried to kill you. And I drank it instead. Jensen's voice was gentle. That drink was meant for your father. You weren't the target. Matthew's voice broke. I could have died. You almost did, I said quietly. Matthew processed this. His breathing came in short gasps. All this time, she was... Oh God, Dad, I'm so sorry. Jensen leaned forward. Matthew, did you notice any unusual behavior from your wife before the party? Matthew stared at the table. Tears fell onto the metal surface. When he finally looked up, his face was devastated. I need to tell you something. He looked at Jensen, then at me. Can I speak to my father privately, just for a minute? Jensen glanced at me. I nodded. 5 minutes. I'll be right outside. He gathered the folders and left, closing the door behind him. The door closed, leaving Matthew and me alone in that sterile interview room with its gray walls and metal table. My son looked at me across that table, tears streaming down his face, and said the words that made my heart clench. Dad, I need to tell you this. I've known something was wrong for 3 months. I hired Claire. I've been investigating Ophelia since March. And in that moment, I understood. My son hadn't been blind. He'd been gathering evidence, too. Both of us had been protecting each other in parallel, neither knowing the other was doing the same thing. Why didn't you tell me? I whispered. Matthew took a shaky breath and began to explain everything. Matthew took a shaky breath and began to speak, his voice fracturing with emotion. What he told me in that small room changed everything I thought I understood. 3 months ago, I found credit card statements in Ophelia's car. I wasn't snooping her purse, tipped over, papers spilled out. I saw the numbers. 89,000 on one card, 45,000 on another. I listened without interrupting. I confronted her gently, asked if we needed to talk about finances. She said it was temporary, she'd handle it. But something felt wrong. A week later, Matthew overheard a phone call. She was in the garage, thought I'd left for work, but I'd forgotten my lunch. I heard her say, he's in the way. Once he's gone, everything goes to Matthew. Then it's ours. His voice caught. I thought she meant divorcing me, taking half. Then she said, he won't live much longer anyway. Just needs a little push. Matthew realized she was talking about me. Why didn't you tell me? I asked quietly. I wasn't sure she could have meant anything. I couldn't accuse my wife of... I couldn't even think it. So I hired Claire. He explained, found Claire Davidson through online research, a reputable private investigator specializing in family cases. Paid $5,000 from a separate account Ophelia didn't know about his teacher's credit union. Claire investigated for 2 months. She found the debt, all of it. Over $320,000. She found the searches on our home computer. Matthew recalled Claire's findings. Ophelia had Googled warfarin overdose symptoms. How long to prove incompetence for power of attorney. Inheritance from elderly parents. I still hoped for another explanation. Maybe she was researching for... I don't know. Something harmless. 1 week before the party, Claire called Matthew at school. Claire said, your wife just purchased warfarin illegally through her sister in Seattle. I have the transaction records. She's planning something for this Saturday, your father's housewarming party. Matthew faced an impossible choice. Confront Ophelia. Tell me, cancel the party. Claire said we needed to catch her in the act, with witnesses, something undeniable. Otherwise, Ophelia would claim misunderstanding, accident, anything. So Claire came to the party undercover. She pretended to be Ophelia's friend, and I watched. My realization began to dawn. You saw her make the drink. Matthew was crying openly now. Claire texted me, watch your father's old-fashioned. She just put something in the shaker. I moved closer. I saw Ophelia pour Dad's glass. I saw her set it on that table with a napkin marking it. Claire texted again. She put the medication in. Don't let him drink it. I had 2 seconds to decide. If I spilled it, she'd try again when I wasn't there. If I told you, she'd deny it, we'd have no proof. Warfarin would metabolize out of my system in a few days. So I made the choice. I stared at my son in disbelief. You drank it on purpose, Matthew nodded. I picked up Dad's glass. I drank it while talking to your colleague. Made it look accidental, like a mix-up. I knew what would happen. Claire had explained warfarin poisoning, the symptoms, the timeline. I knew I'd need to go to the hospital. You could have died. So could you. And you probably have 15, 20 good years left. I have 40. The math was simple. Besides, once the warfarin was in my system, once the hospital ran tests, it would be documented. Undeniable evidence of poisoning. And since I don't take warfarin and you do, and only Ophelia knew both those facts, the evidence would point straight to her. Matthew's voice steadied slightly. I made myself the evidence, Dad. Evidence that couldn't be denied or explained away. My throat constricted. You sacrificed yourself to protect me and trap her. You worked 3 jobs after Mom died to put me through college. You went without so I could have everything. This was nothing compared to that. Silence hung between us. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. Claire advised keeping it secret, said if you knew you might react differently, tip Ophelia off. And I needed to be sure. I needed proof that the woman I married, the mother of my daughter, was actually capable of murder. Now I know, and I wish I didn't. I reached across that metal table and gripped my son's hands. They were shaking ice cold, the hands of a man who had deliberately poisoned himself to save his father's life and expose his wife's crime. Oh, you are exactly the man I always hoped you'd become. I said, my voice breaking too. But God, Matthew, don't ever scare me like that again. He laughed through tears, the sound fractured but real. I promise. Detective Jensen knocked softly, giving us 1 more minute together before the formal statements began, before lawyers and prosecutors and trials. 1 minute to simply be father and son, survivors of the same war, fought from different sides, realizing we'd been protecting each other all along. 6 months later, I stood on the front porch watching autumn leaves blanket the yard I'd fought so hard to keep. The maples blazed red and gold, the oaks swayed in the October breeze. This was the first seasonal change I'd experienced in this house without fear. I reflected on the 6 months since the truth was exposed. June, Detective Jensen's investigation moved swiftly with all the evidence already compiled. Ophelia and Christine were both arrested within a week. The charges: attempted murder, conspiracy, elder abuse, financial exploitation, filing false reports. Christine faced additional charges for illegal possession of controlled substances and federal conspiracy. Both sisters were held without bail, flight risk, with Christine in Seattle and Ophelia in Portland. July, Matthew filed for divorce immediately. He fought for and won sole custody of Grace. Ophelia didn't contest, she was focused on her criminal defense. Matthew moved temporarily to an apartment near my house, close enough for daily visits. August, plea negotiations began. The evidence was overwhelming: text messages, lab results, video footage, financial records, Matthew's testimony, Claire's testimony, my testimony. Ophelia's defense attorney advised taking a plea deal to avoid life in prison. Christine's lawyer recommended the same. September sentencing. Ophelia received 8 years in prison, 10 years post-release supervision, a permanent restraining order from Grace and me, and mandatory restitution $35,000 covering legal fees and medical expenses. Christine received 4 years for conspiracy to commit murder, illegal pharmaceutical possession, and 5 years probation. The sisters were sent to separate correctional facilities. October, now 6 months later, I stood on the porch. Grace, 8 years old and approaching 9, sat at the outdoor table drawing. Matthew pulled into the driveway with grocery bags, weekend visit ritual. Our father-son relationship had deepened and evolved. We could talk about it now, what each of us had done, why we'd kept secrets. We were both trying to protect each other, Matthew said one evening, and we both succeeded, just not the way we'd planned. Grace ran up to me. "Grandpa, look at my picture." The drawing showed a family tree with me at the roots, Matthew as the trunk, Grace as the branches and leaves. Words written across the bottom, strong roots, safe branches. My eyes misted. It's beautiful, sweetheart. Mrs. Henderson says family is about people who keep you safe. You and Daddy kept each other safe. Matthew overheard and smiled sadly. After Grace went inside for a snack, Matthew and I sat on the porch steps. You know what I keep thinking about, Matthew said. Mom. What she would say about all this. She'd say we did what family does. We protected each other. And even when it meant keeping secrets, especially then. Though I hope we won't have any more secrets from now on. Matthew's voice was firm. No more secrets. I promise. We shook hands like a contract. Claire still existed in my life. Coffee occasionally, a professional friendship that might become something more, someday, no rush. James Fletcher still stopped by. Weekly had helped me install a new security system. Diane Montgomery, the attorney, had assisted with victim impact statements and restitution claims. Dr. Melissa Stone had met with Matthew for follow-up exams confirming no lasting damage from the warfarin. The house felt different now. Not a fortress, but a real home. After Matthew and Grace left that evening, I walked through the rooms. Each held a memory, the living room where the party happened now with new furniture. The kitchen where I'd counted pills, medicine cabinet reorganized. The office where I'd documented everything, files now archived. I stood by the window, looking at the oak tree in the backyard. I thought about legacy. What I was leaving Grace wasn't just real estate, but a lesson. About standing up for yourself. About trusting your instincts. About gathering evidence before acting. About family being defined by actions, not just bloodlines. This house was meant to be a retirement refuge. It had become a battlefield. Now it was finally home. Not just a structure of wood and nails, but a place where people who love you gather safely. I turned off the porch light and locked the door behind me. The same door I'd unlocked for that housewarming party 6 months ago, when I'd been naive enough to think the greatest threat to my happiness was loneliness. I'd learned since then that real threats come from familiar faces speaking words of love, pouring poisoned drinks into crystal glasses. But I'd also learned that family isn't about who shares your blood. It's about who stands beside you when the circle closes. Matthew drank poison to save me. I gathered evidence to save him. And together we built something stronger than either could alone. This house, this beautiful craftsman home I'd worked 30 years to afford, was finally truly mine. Not just legally, though the deed sat safely in Diane Montgomery's safe. It was mine in the way that mattered most, where love ruled, where Grace's laughter echoed, where my son and I rebuilt trust from ruins. Tomorrow morning, I'd wake in my own bed, make coffee in my own kitchen, and spend the day however I chose. That freedom, that peace, that simple certainty of safety, that was what I'd fought to claim. That was what I'd won. And standing in the living room, as moonlight filtered through windows I'd personally chosen, I understood something fundamental. A house becomes a home, not when you buy it, but when you're willing to defend it. This is my home, and no one will take it from me again. And to you listening to this family story, remember this. I never imagined the greatest threat to my life would come from someone who called me Dad with a smile while planning my death. God gave me instincts, that cold feeling when Ophelia handed me the glass, and I'm alive today because I listened. God also gave me a son brave enough to drink poison, meant for me turning himself into evidence that couldn't be denied. And God surrounded me with people like James, Denise, and Claire when I needed them most. This family story taught me that you can't ignore warning signs just because they come from family. When something feels wrong, it usually is. Don't be like me. Don't wait until you're holding lab results proving someone tried to kill you before you act. Trust your gut. Document everything, and never ever assume that marriage certificates or blood relations guarantee safety. My dad's revenge wasn't about hatred. It was about survival. Some people think revenge is ugly, but protecting yourself and those you love, that's not revenge, that's justice. When someone tries to take everything from you, fighting back isn't optional. it's necessary. I learned that a real family story isn't written in wedding albums or birth certificates. It's written in who stands beside you when the walls close in. Matthew proved that when he sacrificed himself to save me, that's family, not the woman who poisoned my drink, but the son who drank it to protect me. If you take nothing else from this dad revenge story, take this predator's count on your silence, your doubt, your unwillingness to believe someone close could harm you. Don't give them that advantage. The moment you sense danger, act. Gather evidence. Build your case. Protect yourself before you become another statistic. What I experienced wasn't just dad revenge, it was a father and son protecting each other against a calculated killer. That's the power of real family bonds. If this story resonated with you, please leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. Have you ever faced betrayal from someone you trusted? How did you handle it? Your story might help someone else. And if you found value in this family story, please subscribe to the channel and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. These true accounts exist to educate and protect others. Thank you for listening to the very end. I'm grateful you stayed with me through this journey. A final warning: the stories that follow contain some fictionalized elements constructed for educational purposes. If you prefer not to continue, please feel free to exit now and choose content better suited to your preferences. But if you want to learn how ordinary people survive extraordinary threats, stay with us.